The sky over downtown Chicago was still a bruised shade of gray when Jordan Tate stepped out of the diner, steam rising from the sewer grates and mingling with his breath. It was early morning in the dead of winter, and the city felt more like an icebox than a place where people actually lived. Slush soaked the sidewalks, the kind that looked like it might swallow your foothole if you weren't careful. Jordan's worn-out black shoes were already leaking from the seams, his socks damp and toes numb after 10 hours on his feet pouring coffee for grave shift regulars and the occasional drunk stranger looking for warmth. He pulled his thrifted coat tighter, shoved his hands deep into the pockets, and began the slow walk to the bus stop. He just wanted to get home and sleep, but halfway down Halsted, as he passed a run-down gas station, he froze. There, curled up in the shadow of the doorway, was a little boy no more than 8, skinny as a reed, trembling so hard his teeth chattered loud enough to be heard above the wind. He wore a paper-thin hoodie zipped to his chin and his feet bare. Red, raw were pressed tight against his chest. His eyes darted up, wide and glassy, as if expecting to be yelled at or ignored. Jordan looked around. No one, not a soul. For a heartbeat, he hesitated, unsure if he should call someone, if he should just keep walking like everyone else probably had. But something inside him moved a flicker, a tug, and he stepped forward without a word. He knelt in front of the boy, the cold seeping straight through the knees of his pants, and slowly untied his shoes, thin-soled, battered, but better than nothing. He slipped them onto the kid's feet, gentle as if they were made of glass. Then he pulled off his diner apron, stiff with old grease stains, and wrapped it around the boy's legs like a blanket. The boy just stared at him, stunned. No questions, no thank you, just silence. That same silence settled between them like snowfall. Jordan met his eyes and said softly, "Stay warm. Someone will see you now." And then he stood, turned, and walked away barefoot into the slush-covered street, the cold biting instantly at his skin. He didn't look back, didn't know who the boy was, didn't expect anything in return. He also didn't know that someone, across the street, sitting in their parked car, had caught the whole thing on video. Jordan Tate moved through life like background noise present, necessary but rarely noticed. At 28, he was the kind of man people overlooked, lanky frame, tired eyes, always in the same uniform black slacks, a white shirt slightly frayed at the collar, and a diner apron stained beyond saving. He worked the graveyard shift at a corner diner on the edge of downtown Chicago, clocking 12 hours most nights just to scrape together enough for rent and his sister's mounting medical bills. The apartment he went home to wasn't much one room, peeling paint, a radiator that only worked when it wanted to, but it was his, and more importantly, it was close enough to the rehab center where Alina lived. Alina Tate was Jordan's reason for everything. 3 years younger and far sharper, she had once been a track star, full of light and fire. Then the accident hit by a drunk driver just blocks from campus and everything changed. Paralyzed from the waist down, she now lived in a long-term care facility Jordan could barely afford. Every cent that didn't go toward rent or cheap groceries went to her. He didn't regret it. He never would. But it meant giving up everything else, college, friends, even the illusion of a future beyond survival. He didn't complain. Not because life hadn't been cruel to him, it had, in too many ways, but because somewhere along the way, Jordan had learned that complaining changed nothing. He grew up in the foster system, bouncing between homes. Some were warm and good, like the Morrisons, who gave him his first Christmas present. Others were colder places, where silence kept you safe, where you learned to be invisible. Jordan had long since made peace with the idea that life wasn't fair, especially for people like him. He didn't expect miracles or kindness, but still, he gave what little he could. At the diner, Jordan was dependable, quiet, never late. Mr. Lee, The grumpy 60-something owner, with a clipped voice and tired hands, pretended not to notice the way Jordan sometimes stayed late to clean extra or gave out free coffee to the homeless during the night shift. But once, when Jordan's shoes fell apart completely, Mr. Lee left a pair of old work boots by the locker with a sticky note, "Don't trip." That was as close to affection as he ever got, and Jordan appreciated it more than he'd admit. Then, there was Heather, 29, sharp-jawed, always in a worn trench coat. She came into the diner around 3 a.m. twice a week, always sat at the same booth, always ordered decaf and toast. Divorced, maybe lonely, though she never said. She never asked about Jordan's past, but she noticed things, how he limped a little after long shifts, how his knuckles were raw in winter, how he never wore gloves. She didn't offer pity, just presence. Jordan liked that. She reminded him of Alina in some small way, someone who saw more than she said. Despite the ache in his bones and the weight of his sister's situation pressing into every corner of his life, Jordan wasn't bitter, just tired. He moved through the world with a quiet grace, unnoticed but essential. He gave his time, his effort, his shoes, because it was the only way he knew how to exist. He didn't believe he deserved much. He believed some people were just meant to carry pain so others didn't have to. And yet, somewhere deep beneath the exhaustion and resignation, Jordan carried a fragile hope. Not for rescue or recognition, but to be seen, just once, for more than his silence. For someone to look past the apron, the slouched shoulders, the worn shoes, and say, "I see you." 2 days after giving away his shoes, Jordan showed up at the diner in a pair of ragged sneakers that barely held together. The soles flapped when he walked, laces tied tight around holes that had no business being on anyone's feet, let alone someone serving food. Mr. Lee spotted him the moment he walked. In Jordan, he barked from behind the counter, "You're serving customers. You need shoes." Jordan just gave a quiet shrug, eyes low. "These are all I got," he said, and went straight to the back to clock in, saying nothing about the barefoot boy or the freezing morning. As far as he was concerned, it wasn't anyone's business. He did what felt right, and that was that. But that morning, everything changed. Around noon, the diner's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Customers kept asking to sit in Jordan's section, even when it wasn't his shift. Then Mr. Lee's niece burst into the kitchen holding up her phone, eyes wide. "Jordan, you're viral," she said. Jordan blinked. "What?" She spun the screen around. There it was, grainy security camera footage from across the street, showing him kneeling in the snow, slipping his shoes onto a boy's bare feet. Someone had captured it from a nearby storefront camera, uploaded it with the caption, "This waiter gave his only shoes to a homeless kid. No one asked him to. No one watched. Be like him." The video blew up. By that night, it had over 1 million views. Comments flooded in, people calling him an angel, a saint, asking where they could send donations. Celebrities retweeted the clip with hearts and crying emojis. Local news stations called the diner non-stop. Reporters showed up with vans, cameras, and microphones, asking for the man in the video. Customers came in just to sit where he stood, hoping for a glimpse of the waiter with no shoes. But Jordan hated attention. Every time someone tried to talk to him about it, he ducked into the kitchen or slipped out the back door during break. He turned down every interview, ignored the cameras, and kept wiping down tables like nothing had changed. "I didn't do it to be seen," he mumbled to Mr. Lee, who just sighed and shook his head. "You can't hide now," the older man warned. "They want to know who you are. You gave something when you had nothing. That means something. Don't waste it." Jordan didn't know what to say to that. All he had ever wanted was to get through the day, earn his paycheck, and keep his sister safe. He never expected to be anyone's story. Then the email came. It was from a major non-profit foundation and organization that supported caregivers. community workers, and people quietly making a difference. They had seen the video. They weren't offering him money or fame. They were offering something else entirely, a conversation, a chance, something Jordan never saw coming. The attention didn't feel like gratitude, it felt like noise. Within a week of the video going viral, Jordan's world had turned upside down in ways he hadn't asked for and didn't know how to navigate. The diner, once a quiet corner of his otherwise invisible life, was now swarmed with strangers holding up phones, hoping to capture a piece of the shoeless waiter. They took selfies beside him mid-shift, snapping photos while he poured coffee or wiped down tables. They smiled and thanked him like he was a mascot, but none of them asked how he was holding up. None of them cared that his feet were still cold, that his sister's medical bills hadn't disappeared with the clicks and views. To make things worse, a local news story twisted his gesture into something else entirely. Faith in action, the headline read. They painted him as a street preacher who lived by biblical example, quoting verses he'd never said, giving him a background he didn't recognize. Jordan wasn't religious, he didn't even go to church, but suddenly he was being called Brother Jordan in the comments, and people showed up asking which ministry he was with. He felt like he was living inside a version of himself that wasn't real, a story other people wanted more than the truth. Even the people he knew began to shift. Mr. Lee, always gruff but fair, suddenly started encouraging him to smile more for the customers, nudging him toward tables and saying, "Go on, they came to see you." It wasn't malicious. Mr. Lee seemed proud in his own way, but it still made Jordan feel like a product on display, not a person who had simply done something human. Heather, too, changed. She started lingering longer after her toast and coffee, asking questions she never used to ask. What was going through your mind when you gave him the shoes? Do you ever think about doing more with this attention? She looked at him like she was finally seeing him, but Jordan couldn't tell if it was him she was seeing, or just the version that fit the viral narrative. He didn't know how to let her in. He didn't know if she wanted him, or the idea of him. The final straw came when the rehab center where Alina was recovering reached out to feature his generosity on their website. A glossy campaign. A smiling brother-sister photo with a caption about resilience and sacrifice. Jordan stared at the email, feeling nauseous. He wanted Alina to get more resources, more care, but he didn't want to be used to sell inspiration. He wasn't a brand. He was just tired when he told Alina. She didn't sugarcoat her response. "You've given everything for me, Jay," she said, gripping the joystick on her wheelchair. "Let the world give something back to you for once." Her voice was firm. "No nonsense. You think this spotlight changes who you are. It doesn't. You're still the guy who gave away his shoes in silence. Don't let other people's noise drown that out." He didn't answer, but her words stayed with him. Then a letter came. It arrived at the diner in an envelope with no return address, addressed to the waiter who gave his shoes away. Inside, a neatly folded sheet of lined paper, written in careful, uneven script. It was from the boy's mother. Her name was Tasha. She explained that her son, Sammy, had run away from their transitional shelter after a fight. He was scared. The staff were looking for him all morning. "If you hadn't found him," she wrote, "if you hadn't given him warmth when no one else did, my son might not be alive." She thanked Jordan for saving her boy's life, not with grand gestures, but with quiet kindness. She said Sammy had seen the video too, and he wanted to meet the man who gave him hope. Jordan read the letter 3 times before he could breathe again. A week later, in the back corner of the diner during the slow afternoon lull, they met. Tasha was thin, her coat too big, but her eyes were strong, grateful in a way that didn't ask for anything. Sammy stood beside her, small hands clutching something folded. When Jordan crouched down to greet him, the boy didn't speak right away. He just looked up at him, eyes wide, and then held out the paper, a drawing in bright crayon colors. Jordan, tall and smiling, kneeling next to Sammy, with big yellow sun rays behind them. At the bottom, in crooked handwriting, "You're my hero. Someday I'll help someone too." Jordan felt something crack open. Not in a painful way, but in a way that made space for air to rush in. For the first time since the video, he didn't feel like a symbol or a headline. He felt seen, just as he was. The offer felt like something out of someone else's life. A nationwide kindness campaign, full sponsorship for Elena's therapy, and a full scholarship for Jordan to finish college, everything he never dared to dream of, handed to him in a single phone call from the non-profit. The woman on the line sounded sincere. They wanted him to be the face of a movement, to use his quiet act of compassion as a symbol for the kind of good the world needed more of. Jordan didn't know how to respond. He'd spent years hiding in corners, fading into routine, surviving. Now people wanted to put his face on billboards, but just as quickly as the door opened, it threatened to slam shut. A week into planning, the non-profit called back. A board member had done a background check. "We need to talk," they said carefully. "There's a record." Jordan's stomach dropped. He knew exactly what they were referring to. 16 years old, a group home outside Joliet. One of the younger boys, a scared, wiry 12-year-old, had stolen a tablet from the staff break room. When the home supervisor found it in their bunk room, Jordan said it was his. He didn't hesitate. He'd taken the blame so the kid wouldn't be transferred to a harsher facility. He never explained why. No one ever asked. Now, that decision, one he'd never spoken of, was threatening to cost him everything. The non-profit's tone shifted. "We're not sure how this plays with the message. You understand, right?" Jordan nodded, numb. He did understand, but something inside him rebelled. Not in anger, but in clarity. He was tired of being painted over, twisted into someone else's image. If they wanted to tell his story, they had to tell the truth. All of it. He offered to speak. On camera, no script, no PR manager. They hesitated, then agreed. The interview was raw. Jordan sat on a folding chair in a bare studio room, hands folded tight. He told them what happened. "Yeah, there's a record," he said, eyes steady. "I took the fall for someone else. I'd do it again. I've made mistakes. I've also tried every day to be better. Not for attention, not for applause. For myself, for my sister, because I want to live in a world where people get second chances." He didn't try to sound noble. He just sounded honest. The non-profit posted the full clip, not knowing what to expect. It exploded. If the first video made him a symbol, this one made him a person. The comments were flooded with support strangers sharing their own pasts. Former foster kids, ex-cons, single parents, teachers, nurses, all echoing the same thing. "This is the kind of man we need more of." The video was shared more than the original. A senator even tweeted it. The non-profit reversed its hesitation within days. They were back in, and this time, Jordan didn't feel like a puppet. He felt like himself, seen, whole. Finally, Jordan stood at the back of the packed community center, a clipboard in hand, his name stitched onto the non-profit's vest. He now wore 3 afternoons a week. He had just finished helping a teenager named Malik fill out an application for housing assistance. The boy reminded him of himself at 16, sharp-eyed, withdrawn, pretending not to care but craving safety. It had been 6 months since Jordan enrolled in a social work program at the local college. Using the scholarship, the non-profit insisted he accept. He took night classes, pored over textbooks during diner breaks, and still worked weekends to make up the difference. But for the first time, his exhaustion came with purpose. Meanwhile, Elena's therapy, now fully covered, was showing progress beyond what either of them expected. She could move her fingers, hold a spoon again. They video chatted almost every night, her sarcasm sharper than ever, but now laced with hope. "Don't get soft on me just because I can play piano again," she joked, tapping on her tablet. Jordan laughed, a real laugh, the kind that cracked his ribs a little in the best way. Things weren't perfect. He still lived in the same cramped studio, still rode the late-night bus after class. But the weight that once clung to him of failure, of invisibility, was lighter now. Jordan wasn't a headline anymore. He wasn't a symbol. He was a man slowly rebuilding himself from the inside out. Heather, no longer just the curious diner regular, had become something steadier. Their conversations grew deeper. About the video, not about what he had done, but about music, childhood, books they both hated in school. She liked that he listened. He liked that she never tried to fix him. It wasn't a love story, not yet, but it was real. And Jordan trusted real more than anything else. Back at the diner, Mr. Lee had made one quiet gesture Jordan would never forget. Behind the register, next to an old photograph of the original 1970s menu, hung a framed picture of Jordan kneeling before Sammy, slipping the shoes onto the boy's feet. Beneath it, etched into a brass plate, were 6 words: "Kindness is free. So is courage." Jordan never pointed it out to anyone, but every time he passed it, he felt a quiet certainty settle inside him. He was no longer just surviving, he was becoming. A year later, the snow fell just the same quiet and heavy over the city, blanketing the streets. Jordan once trudged in worn shoes and thinner hope. He walked past the diner, nodding to Mr. Lee through the fogged-up window, the smell of grease and coffee slipping into the cold air. The corner gas station still flickered with the same dying fluorescent buzz. And there, nestled in the doorway, was a child, this one bundled but still shivering, eyes wary, hunger etched into his small face. Jordan didn't hesitate. He walked over, knelt down slowly, and pulled a pair of knit gloves from his coat pocket, textures he always kept now, just in case. He handed the boy a wrapped sandwich from the center's pantry, then slipped a small contact card into his hand. "There's a place a few blocks down," Jordan said gently. "They'll keep you warm. Just show them this." The boy looked up at him, surprised, not by the gift, but by the care in Jordan's voice. As Jordan stood and walked away, the wind kicked up, lifting the edge of his coat. From the inside pocket, a folded, crinkled paper peeked out Sammy's drawing, a tiny figure, sketched in marker, kneeling in the snow, shoes in hand. Jordan reached in, tucked it back in place, like something sacred. The street was still cold, still cracked and imperfect, but Jordan walked through it with steady steps, not because the world had crowned him a hero, not because anyone was watching, but because he knew now what he hadn't back then. He mattered. His kindness mattered, even when no one saw, especially then. And this time, he didn't feel invisible. He felt real. He felt enough fade out.